60 Minutes Overtime.
As you walk around Attu, you do definitely feel the presence of the ghosts. Especially with the way the wind blows, the way the wind sounds. And you don't know where you're traipsing. I'm Dragan Mihailovich, and I'm a producer for 60 Minutes. This week on 60 Minutes, we go to Attu, the last of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. It's 1,500 miles from Anchorage, the westernmost point of North America.
The Japanese strike.
In June of 1942, the Japanese Imperial Army invaded the island of Attu. It was the first soil that the United States had lost since the War of 1812. They expected resistance, and instead they found 42 Aleut natives, a school teacher, and her husband. And they took it over in no time. Finally, nearly a year later, the United States summoned a force of 11,000 troops to invade Attu and to recapture it from the Japanese. So there was this battle that the American officers told their men would take only 3 days that lasted 3 weeks. And it turned into one of the most brutal battles of the entire war.
Anything on Attu, you're not just going to fight the enemy, you're going to fight the island and the elements.
We went with Marco Masick to Attu. Mark is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who's written a book about the Battle of Attu.
Attu's home to some of the worst weather on Earth. 250 days of the year, it's either raining or snowing. They get 6 feet of snow a year. There's only 8 days a year when the clouds and fog lift.
To get there, we had to stop first at Cold Bay, another Aleutian island, and then to Adak. When we got to Adak, the pilot was outside and he said, "I've just gotten word that the barometric pressure is dropping in a couple of hours. I think we've got a 2-hour window where we can land on Attu. Otherwise, we might be stuck here for days." I say we should go for it. Let's go. And off we went. The pilot stayed with us. That was part of the deal. There was no chance the pilot was going to leave us on the island because there was no guarantee he could get back. But that meant that he had to tie down the plane because the winds are so strong. Attu is about 350 square miles. That's about 15 times the size of Manhattan. The crazy thing was there were the 4 of us on the island, and we were the only ones. It's the strangest sensation in the world. You don't hear cars honking. There are no planes even flying overhead. All you hear are the birds and the wind. Now, we had to walk everywhere. There are no vehicles. There's nothing.
Hey! I made it!
That means carrying the tripod, carrying the camera, carrying the extra batteries, carrying your own information that you have, carrying first aid supplies. If something happens, sprain an ankle, break an ankle, God forbid, you're on your own. I mean, there's no help coming. We made our way towards the memorial, which was going to be about 12 miles round trip. And the closer we got, and the clouds just parted. We were on top of what's known as Engineer Hill, right by the Japanese Peace Memorial. There's not a cloud in the sky in any direction. I mean, that happens maybe 4 or 5 times a year. As we were making our way around the island, suddenly you see foxholes sort of like pockmarked on this mountain. And then we came across an ammunition shed where the Japanese had stored, a lot of their weapons up high on a hill. We saw some other weapons, rusted weapons, on the American side. So in some respects, it was as if it hadn't been that long since the battle, when in fact at that point it was 75 years ago.
They had faced no battlefield like this before, where there's no vestiges of civilization. There's no electricity on Attu. There's no roads on Attu. I think that the U.S. generals went in and thought that they were going to be fighting a garrison of maybe 3,000 Japanese. Instead, they had to fight Attu. They had no way to run supply lines, and so they had long lines of hundreds of men who would have to pass gear up from man to man to move it up the mountain.
It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life, and I've done a lot of traveling in my 21 years at 60 Minutes. But as you walked around and you see this spectacularly beautiful place, there's a little bit of a melancholy that sets in, because you know of how many people who lost their lives, you know how many kids grew up not knowing their dads, and that gives you pause. Such a gorgeous spot on Earth, and you had this awful awful 3-week battle in May of 1943.